Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions or comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 157, Masonic Trials. As for introductions, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And I will now hand it off to Juan Sepulveda.
Hello, brothers. This is Juan Sepulveda from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson.
Hey guys, RJ from Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, where I sit as a secretary and do a bunch of other Masonic stuff. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Right Worshipful. And finally, Jason Richards.
Hey everybody, Jason Richards here, Worshipful Master of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia.
Great. So off we go. Into Masonic news this week, we have, of course, the greatest 300th anniversary celebration that has ever been, because it's the first. Meaning, on June 23rd and 24th of 2017, go check out the 300 Freemasonry's Legacy, Freemasonry's Future, an event we're planning to celebrate 300 years of organized Freemasonry. And you too can get tickets at www.themasonic.com/300. What do you get? You get at least the four of us plus a couple extras. We're putting the agenda out now. RJ, do you want to talk about some late breaking news on the agenda?
Sure. So it's been a while, been talking about it, and we have a pretty solid agenda. And I'll just give you some bullet points here because things are going to still get further solidified, and there'll be even more details coming out over the next few weeks, and you're going to want to check out the website for that stuff. But basically, the Friday before, we're going to have this early check-in. We'll probably do some hanging out. We're probably going to grab some pizza. It'll be like a buy-your-own thing, and we're just hanging out. We'll probably most definitely plan something fun for Friday night as well. But as far as Saturday goes, Saturday, June 24th, we're going to have starting first thing in the morning, we're going to do welcome and introduction. So I know how much everybody really, really loves everybody's 20-minute introductions, right? This isn't going to be like that. It's going to be boom, 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 introductions, and welcome, why we're here. And Brother Mike Hambrecht's probably going to give a brief history of the United Grand Lodge of England. We've got Steve Harrison, who is going to come through with a newer topic, and it's called The Craftsman's Journey, and we'll have a lot of fun with that. Shortly after that, of course, we're going to do lunch. That will probably have a catered and a non-catered option to see what we can get away with there. We'll have some breakout discussions, so we're going to pool topics. We'll split into some groups, discuss findings, and we'll do a couple of those discussion breakout sessions. We're going to do a Masonic trivia game, which you guys will use your smartphones and split into teams, and you'll be able to answer questions, and we'll keep score and tally via a special app that we're going to use for that. There'll be some really kick butt prizes there. And what's really cool, we're going to do a live taping of TMR, hopefully. And that'll be with Q&A, and the topic suggestion will be, I think it'll be fun if we just take that topic suggestion from the floor, so unplanned. Shortly after that, probably break for some cocktails. And, of course, it's going to culminate. We will definitely have cocktails. And we're going to have a festive board, very traditional festive board with keynote speaker Mark Tabbert. Brother John Ruark had mentioned that last week. And finally, some closing remarks by TMR. And then this is all like kind of, early evening after this, we're gonna hit it what we used to call classically an afterglow, which usually is cocktails, discussion, and fellowship on into the night. So whenever to question mark, right? Uh, it's gonna be really, really fun, and hopefully you guys will uh, have just an amazing time. Some really nice details is that well, I guess I'll let somebody else say it, but what's different about our 300 celebration is that we're not being put on by a Grand Lodge, and it's not a tiled thing. So what do we get for that?
Flexibility.
Some flexibility, but probably some beers. So
Oh,
we're gonna have there will be some beers and stuff over the dinners, and it'll just be really nice to be able to be right there. We had Brother Juan Sepulveda. He's already been working on booking, and we've got some good rooms available at a couple hotels, right? Like an 11-12 minute walk, I think he said.
Mhm.
And right from the George Washington Memorial. So you're talking about 11 or 12 minute walk in June. It's going to be nice. It's going to be gorgeous outside. There's going to be some other things that also develop over this. There's a lot of room in the middle for other things to be added. So just keep checking the website, and that's the agenda as of right now. Really excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited too that we've experienced different conferences in various industries, and we've tried to learn from them and apply to what we're putting together. And among those things that we've learned is that you don't want to get hit over the head with just lecture after talk. Here you'll have an opportunity to commiserate with your brothers, to discuss what's been presented. So you'll have a very good mix of presentations and interaction that I think it's going to be a good mix for it to be a great experience. One thing that I guarantee you, if you come and you don't have an awesome time, the problem is you. Simple as that. No, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I guarantee you. We're very excited about it. As we mentioned, we continue to have developments of new things that become available to us. And the more things become available, more doors open up. And the fact that so many brothers from around the country have already said yes, sign me up, that has opened even more opportunities for us to enjoy ourselves when we go to Alexandria. So if you've been thinking about it, you haven't separated your spot yet, I encourage you to do that as soon as you can. Prices for the tickets are going to go up next week, right?
I believe so.
Yes, next week the prices are going to go a little bit up. So you don't want to miss it. You don't want to pay a premium from something we're giving you a chance to join right now. And the sooner the better. You can take advantage of the rooms that we've separated at the various hotels down there, and you give us a more accurate count of how many people are coming, so we can have better things for you. So we look forward to seeing you there in June.
So, fun fact, most of the people who have registered already are from out of the DC metro area, which is fantastic. So we have a lot of traveling men coming over for this once-in-a-lifetime event. Go ahead, check out the updates. We're going to put an FAQ up of the hotels and some of the other questions we've been getting. Check that out at theMasonicRoundtable.com/300. While you're there, go to our shop page, which has new pins and awesome t-shirts. You can go check out how to find those via Masonic Revival, as well as Juan's store himself at the Winding Stairs, to get your very own TMR t-shirt. Wear it at the 300 event and you'll be awesome.
So real quick,
Yeah.
the new pin design is pretty awesome. What made you do the 3 points outside the circle?
So we did a good first 3 runs of the Masonic Roundtable pin, and the differences between the first 3 were relatively minor. We changed some colors around according to the symbolism that we hold dear to, specifically, us on the Masonic Roundtable. And we said, you know what, this is the last run of this particular design that we're going to do. So when we got to the point where we worked out a deal with Masonic Revival to be our new pin supplier, I said, okay, you know what, I want to do something different. I want to make it I want to keep some familiarity, but really go outside the box. And I realized, you know, as I was in lodge one night, just looking around at all the pins in the district and everybody wearing the pins, I'm like, wow, there are a ton of round pins, and there aren't very many pins that really, you know, sort of pop and break that sphere. So that's why my wife and I got together and went ahead and designed something that was a little bit more interesting. And I tell you what, when you wear our new TMR pin, the design just completely pops to the point where you can see it and recognize what it is from a long ways away, just because the points are sticking out from the circle. So I thought it was something that would differentiate the design from the others and would make it really pop. And I did actually the same thing with my master's pin from Masonic Revival. I'll show that here real quick. So I had the sprigs of acacia pop outside of the circle for that. And it's just, you know, just a little nuance that you can put into your pins as you're making pins that make them stand out a little bit.
It's awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
No problem. It's fun.
So yes, we're shameless self-promoters. This is fun because you know, a new design jumps out. Another thing, last thing on that is also, if you want it in 2 days, because you got a lodge event coming up, go ahead and go on over to Amazon, search for the Masonic Roundtable. Boom, Amazon Prime, you get it in 2 days. How's that?
And I do know there are a couple listeners who bought pins right before we changed over to Masonic Revival. So I've gotten your emails and I will respond to them and make sure those are taken care of this week. So I apologize for the delay.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is, well, it's our next Masonic news item, which is Paul Bessel's website is back up and running. I think a couple of sponsors from the Masonic Society chipped in to actually work with Paul Bessel's web hosting provider to dig through the backups in the archives to restore this and get this back online. So the Masonic Society basically paid to get this thing back up and running. For those who aren't familiar, Paul Bessel is a DC area Mason who updated his own personal website with a ton of Masonic information about recognition and all sorts of nuances across jurisdictions. It almost became a go-to guide. And then he kind of stopped updating it really in the 2011 to 13 timeframe, but still kept the site up for anyone to research. So again, he's not updated it for any new information, but the information he had is back up and running. Go check that out at bessel.org. And to end on a sad note, we have another
Shocking note.
A shocking note, yes. I don't know what to say about this because late breaking news: Scottish Rite visitors claim they were secretly recorded in the women's restroom. Long story short, and I don't remember the valley that this came from.
It was Louisville.
Louisville, Kentucky. In the Scottish Rite Valley building, some women were changing it for a dance that was going on and knocked off a little tiny coat hook that had a pinhole camera in it. And when they saw it, it fell on the floor. You could see the memory card sticking out. So they took the memory card out and just watched in horror about what someone has been filming. There's still an investigation going on. They're still looking for if anyone has information on it. Unfortunately, in the news article, it does state that the first recording, right? So the person who put it up would be the first recording because they had triggered,
Motion sensor activated.
was wearing a red hat, a red Scottish Rite hat.
Yeah.
So that it's completely against everything that we stand for, and it's just words don't describe how how ridiculous that this is that we're even talking about it. Nevertheless, that someone would have the idea that this would be okay. Comments?
You want to kill Masonry, this is a great way to kill Masonry.
That's it.
And be a terrible person at the same time.
Yeah, nothing really we can say. I mean, it's like we joke all the time about goofy stuff, happening, but when it really happens, and we all have to like face the public, we come on the show every week and we try to tell people the good things that we do all the time, and we try to let our actions speak louder than words, and unfortunately actions like this come out and speak louder because actions do speak louder than words, right? And these actions come out, and unfortunately not everybody is going to hear the apologies from everybody who didn't do this, and there's not much we can say or even joke about. It's just totally screwed up.
No, it's a disaster, and it's an absolutely terrible thing. And our hearts go out to anybody who could have been victimized by that. I'm just really, really glad that someone caught it, and I hope they tear like out that bathroom to make sure there aren't any more in there.
Throw the book at them. Yep. Okay, moving on. Let's get to tonight's topic, which is Masonic Trials. This has been a listener requested topic, and one that I'm surprised we haven't covered in 150 episodes. But there comes a time where we've talked a little bit about Masonic offenses in the past, and we'll get into the nuances that go with that. But where a Mason, like the one described before, may act in a non-Masonic manner, where now the fraternity has to deal with an issue that's pressing of what to do with this man who is in the fraternity and has to justify or at least stand trial upon the actions of which he's being accused of. Every jurisdiction is different. Every jurisdiction has different articles which make something Masonic or unmasonic conduct. So what I'm going to propose is we start with a brief description of what makes something unmasonic conduct and therefore trial worthy, and then we'll get into some of the nuances of how each jurisdiction represented here covers Masonic trials. And I am going to start with Jason Richards, who has a copy of the Virginia Methodical Digest at the ready. Jason, what's a Masonic offense in Virginia?
So we actually have a full section in the Methodical Digest that lists what constitutes a Masonic offense. The general definition is very broad, but then it's also got about a dozen or so addenda and or decisions attached to it. So I'll just kind of give the broad brush overview and then key into 2 or 3 of those addendums, most of which were actually added in the very early 1900s. So when you read them, just keep that in mind because some of them are a bit out of date. So what constitutes a Masonic offense? While in the state of Virginia, Masons have to obey the civil laws, support the establishment of government. You have to keep the mysteries of the order inviolable, preserve and obey the laws and resolutions of the Grand Lodge of Virginia. That's a big thing. Observe the ancient landmarks of Masonry. Be interesting if those landmarks changed and morphed over time, right? What episode was that? And discharge their duties and obligations to their families, to each other, and mankind in general. So essentially, if you're a Mason in Virginia, if you violate your obligation, if you disobey your laws and or your state's laws and or the laws of the Grand Lodge of Virginia, then you can be charged with a Masonic offense. So going forward, there were a number of decisions that were put into place. One group of them has to deal with the idea of the commercialization of Masonry. So Grand Lodge of Virginia, and this has gotten a couple people in the hot water recently. The Grand Lodge of Virginia is very sensitive to brethren using their Masonic affiliation for their own personal commercial gain. So it's unmasonic, according to the Methodical Digest, for a brother to print his Masonic affiliations on his advertising matter. So if a brother is a carpenter, he can't put a square and compasses on his business card or on his carpentry truck, and he can't, take out advertising saying, "Hey, square work made by a brother," or something along those lines. There's another one that deals with printed rituals. So Virginia is a mouth to ear state, so possession of a printed ritual is a Masonic offense. That's something that's been on the books since about 1924. Back in 1910, this is really interesting. As soon as I find it, it's a Masonic offense for a Mason to desert his wife and leave her without means of livelihood. Be interesting to see how often that is actually called into question in this day and age. And those are some of the big ones. There are a couple here that are I think personally woefully out of date, like so-called Masonic chain letters and chain prayers violate the postal laws and must not be used by Masons for this reason.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's some good jokes I have lined up for Facebook forwards, but there we are.
Yeah, and so those are the other big one has to deal with a Mason trying to simultaneously get degrees in two different jurisdictions. So if you petition in Virginia and you're going through the degrees in Virginia, and then you also petition another Grand Lodge at the same time, that's a Masonic offense, not only for the brother trying to get the degrees in multiple jurisdictions, but also the signers of his petition. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And then you've got a couple things like unmasonic conduct toward the office of the Grand Master is punishable by 6 months suspension, and then publication of the Virginia Masonic ritual is punishable by a year suspension.
Interesting. Okay, Robert, you said you found some interesting articles in your Grand Lodge laws. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Grand Lodge of Illinois is fairly broad in their strokes, which is both, in my opinion, good and bad, in that there's just a lot of room for interpretation and there's a lot of wiggle room. However, there are some interesting ones. Illinois starts, it's code 480s. It's like a 484. So code 484 Masonic offenses, Illinois says basically the offenses of which a lodge may take notice, and to which it shall give its full, fair, and lawful trial, and for which upon conviction administer adequate punishment, are unlawful and immoral conduct, immorality, and particularly acts which tend to impair the good name of Masonry, or which violate Masonic obligations, or the bylaws and regulations of the lodge or the Grand Lodge. So you can see how huge that is, right? Like everything under the sun can be covered under 484. However, we have a couple other ones that are pretty, interesting. Code 485. A lodge shall not on any pretense introduce intoxicating liquors at any official lodge function in the building where the lodge is meeting during such an event. So that's a Masonic offense. Code 486. Masons are prohibited from appearing in public drinking saloons in their Masonic clothing, and any Mason thus offending shall be disciplined. What constitutes clothing? If I have a lapel pin on and I'm in a pub after a lodge meeting, is that a Masonic offense? Wearing a Masonic ring, is that a Masonic offense? If I'm wearing my Grand Lodge representative shirt, or just a Grand Lodge of Illinois shirt, and I go to an after event and I've got that on, that's a Masonic offense. It's kind of interesting that it is such. We've got disciplinary action resulting in the expulsion or suspension by one lodge. It is across the board in all lodges. This one's kind of interesting, right? And this has to have come out of an actual case of this happening. Lodges shall not take cognizance or knowledge, or notice rather, of difficulties of a legal character growing out of a business transaction between brethren, or entertain charges against a brother for the purpose of adjusting mere legal rights, pecuniary or otherwise, unless such charges shall clearly specify fraud or moral turpitude on the part of the alleged offender. So basically, if two bros have a business deal outside a lodge and the lodge sides with one of those guys, the lodge can't get in there and say, well, you're going to do this. And the master shall not permit any charges or specifications or any other subject matter, either written, oral, involving questions or partisan sectarian character, to be read in or in any manner presented to the lodge. That's it. Those are the only Masonic offenses in the book. Of course, though, that first one's a doozy. 484 kind of covers everything under the sun.
And one thing I forgot to mention in Virginia, Robert, talking about business transactions, there is an addendum that talks specifically about bankruptcy and how bankruptcy in and of itself is not a Masonic offense. So in so much as long as the reason for bankruptcy was not violation of your civil laws. So that which would be covered under the main, definition, as it were, of Masonic offenses in Virginia.
Yeah, that's wild.
Okay, Juan, how about down in Florida?
Down in Florida is very hot, so I'm muted because I got my air on. Well, it is very broad as well. And one of the things that I see here is it shows a juxtaposition between the virtues and the vices. So as part of the regulations, it says, as piety, secrecy, obedience, temperance, truth, honesty, chastity, and charity are a few of the many virtues upon which mystic covenants or virtues are based, so their contraries, profanity, evil speaking, insubordination, deceit, intemperance, lewdness, and derision, are a few of the many vices which are subjects to fraternal discipline. So in a sense, when I read this, I think of the fact that the men that we allow to join our fraternity are men who are characterized by their virtue. And whenever one of these men is jeopardizing the perception of Freemasonry by acting in a way that is counter to those qualities that characterize a Mason, then actions need to be taken. And when it comes to Masonic trials, I personally haven't witnessed a Masonic trial myself. I have witnessed, though, the intervention of the Masonic leadership into the life and dealing of someone who is actually acting unmasonically. So it's almost as jurisprudence. How can I say this? A trial is that last resort, but nothing stops a master from actually intervening in a Mason's dealings and say, listen, you're threatening, you're doing something here that is perceived negatively. You need to stop it, or you need to let us know what's happening. And if that doesn't work, I guess one of the next step will be to actually bring charges upon them. One of the things that I found very interesting about that opening clause is the inclusion of derision, or in other words, speaking negatively or in jest or mocking in a mocking way of the fraternity and their leadership. So I thought that is something that could be very dangerous if someone is speaking candidly publicly about what they think of their fraternity and their Grand Lodge. So that's what I start with. I was looking within the digest to see if there's any more specific description of what Masonic offenses would be, and there is the usual moral turpitude comments, which is still kind of like open to interpretation, like what really is it. But one thing that really stood out was how heavy against alcohol consumption it is in the digest of Florida. Not consumption, but for it to be done in premises. So
Wow.
there are a lot of clauses here that have to do with having it in and using it in properties, how it's only okay for ritual use. And we've discussed this before. But it was very interesting to me how heavily it is, because there are many, many clauses where it talks about alcohol use and consumption.
Interesting.
Mhm.
And it goes without saying that any brother, entered apprentice and above, should be familiar with at least their laws of their state, so that way you know what's in there, because it sounds like Florida's a much more drier state than other states. And then that's kind of what got that one past master in trouble for marrying his partner, right? That it was an old unmasonic conduct thing on the books in Tennessee, and it was kind of ignored, but it was kind of one of those, well, no one's really going to do anything with that. And then he got brought up on Masonic charges. So what happens when you get brought up on Masonic charges? Well, here in Virginia, there's a whole process, and it's outlined for at least a good 30 or 40 pages in our we call our methodical digest, our Grand Lodge laws.
And you're going to go through point by point, right?
Line by line. Section 4.23. Here we go. The short version is that they have a very detailed process of how things should be followed, and it kind of covers all the what if scenarios along the way. But the long and short of it is, I kind of like how it starts off by saying that any Mason, entered apprentices and above, can submit in writing a charge for unmasonic conduct. That has to go to the lodge and be read at the lodge. So you can't have this cowardice right from the beginning, right? It has to be serious enough that you have to put your name on paper and have that thing read publicly to your lodge, publicly in the tiled portion of the lodge, not public to the world. But that way you prevent that cowardice, right? So it has to be a big deal to start. Then the master pulls together a committee to make sure that everything looks okay, and it's just basically a committee to make sure that the details are there, who, what, when, where, why, and then sends it up the chain of command to the Grand Lodge to basically announce that they're going to start a trial. There's rules for how to form a trial, of who should be there, and it includes a lot of people with Grand and past Grand in their names to make sure that really the knowledge is there, I guess, for the procedures to go on. But it does culminate and say that any 3 Master Masons shall be a quorum to start the trial. This is important because it's going to go to kind of my closing thoughts on the Masonic trial portion. After that, they then have the procedures of holding the trial, and it gives the accuser the chance to, a defendant, I guess in this case, to say plead guilty or not guilty. And if they plead guilty, there are ways to handle that. That's left even to the Grand Master. So the Grand Master has a lot of sway in the sense of how things can be. Even if someone pleads guilty, the Grand Master can jump in and steer the punishment, as it were. So I guess it's good that it has a little bit of checks and balances. It's not left to the passions of the lodge, but there are a couple provisions that could be left to the unanimous vote of the people at the trial. So that's really interesting too, if you really catch everybody on a bad day. And then, you know, those the results are indefinite, especially if you've been suspended or expelled. At that point, that is indefinite. But there are again things that can go on how to appeal. You have 60 days to appeal up to the Grand Master to present your case as well. So it's kind of boring writing. If Nick were here, he'd love it as the lawyer and the procedures guy. But they've put a lot of thought into that, and it's good that there are some checks and balances there.
Now, I'm curious, of us four, how many of you read through this, you know, before researching this, like read through it completely?
I've had to, strictly because of my role in the district. And it's very much similar to the way Virginia does it. Some interesting differences to note are, so Masonic offenses here, or when something's brought up, same thing. You have to have it in writing. It goes to the worshipful master. And then at that point, it gets handed actually over to the junior warden. Actually, it might be the senior warden. Anyway, it gets handed to a warden, and it's their job to head this up.
It's junior warden here in Virginia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it is here too. Junior warden. It's their job to head this up. And some interesting notes too is that in Illinois, there is no statute of limitations on any charge that can be brought upon another brother. That is specifically stated in one line, just like that, in our Constitution and bylaws. I think that implies an incredible amount of trust within the brotherhood. So I think that's commendable. I don't necessarily know if that's smart, but I'm not a lawyer. And I have never witnessed a Masonic trial ever. Some other things too, like last year at our Grand Lodge communications, one of the items that actually came up for a vote was whether or not somebody's going to call me on this and say that I was wrong, but I seem to recall a motion being made so that we don't have to have a stenographer, and we can just record it instead. But I believe it is at the cost of the lodge to get a stenographer to record all the proceedings as well. So it is a lengthy, arduous process that costs the lodge money, and we all know lodges got all that cash just laying around. Yeah, making it rain, right? So yeah, it's very similar here in Illinois to Virginia. Do you guys have a statute of limitations there, or is it not even mentioned?
I couldn't find it yet in my digest, but I'll take a quick skim while Juan answers.
Yeah, I'll have to look too, because I don't remember coming across it. But the reason I ask if you've read this before is because I wonder how many brothers actually familiarize themselves with the jurisprudence aspect of Masonry before they join, or even shortly after joining. The only reason I read through it is because I wanted to read the digest. I came across so many people that in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of a heated discussion, would say, well, the digest says this and that and the other. And somebody else would would stand up with equal confidence and say, no, the digest says blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to make sure that I read through it all, regardless of how tedious and how difficult the reading might have been. So, like, I wonder how many brothers actually push through. It's almost like reading through numbers in the Bible. It's like, did you really read the whole Bible, or did you skip numbers? You know,
Or Acts.
or yeah. So it's kind of tedious, and it's kind of some of it's a little bit boring. But I'm sure you'll be reading it if you be brought up on charges.
So the last thing I wanted to add before we go to social media is it's been my experience. Again, fortunately, I've not been part of nor have seen any Masonic trials in my 10 years as a Mason. However, I've heard of things happening in districts close to mine, and my interest kind of in how the Masonic trial structure got at least is run in our state came from a lot of reading I did on Freemasons for Dummies blog, where if you look at especially actions where, well, let's just take the most recent example of the homosexual brother who's a past master. If you look at the details, and that they can be a lot long and dry, you'll find consistently that a lot of Grand Lodges may not follow their own rules that are laid out in their Masonic law. And that's really that's a shame, because you really hope, if nothing else, that a fair trial is laid out such that a brother can defend himself if he is falsely accused, or if he has some defense to stand on. And time and time again, I mean, you can do the research yourself. Go to freemasonsfordummies.blogspot.com. Just search for trial. I'm sure you'll find lots of examples. And if you read the details, you'll see where a trial was formed over here, but the defendant was sent in a different location at a different time. And they'll say, well, he never showed up, so therefore we're gonna assume he's guilty. Little things like that just make you say, really, come on, guys. So and then it becomes their word versus yours, right? And if it's your word versus the king, who wins? It's the king. So
It's good to be the king.
it's good to be the king. So it's, as Juan said, it's good to know for yourself what the laws are and the procedures are of the entire Masonic law in your area, but especially Masonic trials. Let's switch over to Jason for social media tonight. We've had some good questions.
All right, we're going to start with a meme from our awesome friends at Masonic Memes. Grand Lodge holds Masonic trials in the basement in their wine, WHINE, cellar.
Not
Wah.
his best, but it's not bad either.
It was too good to pass up. But moving on, Brother Brad Parsons has some really good questions. First and foremost, he asks, so who can actually bring up Masonic charges against a brother?
Anybody.
Even a non-Mason?
No, it has to be a Mason.
Mm.
In Florida, it has to be a Mason.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be from this jurisdiction. It could be a Mason throughout.
Yeah, same thing here in Illinois. Any Mason can bring charge. That's an EA and up, can bring charges against any other Mason, and then those charges have to go to the worshipful master of the quote-unquote offenders lodge.
Interesting. In Virginia, any officer or a member of a lodge, so that includes entered apprentices, can make written accusation against anyone, any Masonic affiliation, including those sojourning through the area as well.
Yes.
So that's a key thing too. You can't just crash someone else's party and leave and hope you're going to get off.
So interesting tidbit that I glossed over when I was looking at the Methodical Digest tonight. Masonic offenses, like John said, in Virginia, the Virginia Masonic law applies to sojourning brethren while they are in this jurisdiction. So
know the laws of the state you're traveling to?
Yep. good luck trying to get, their Methodical
Well-
Digest rule book if you're not a member of that grand jurisdiction. But
It's
good luck.
interesting though,
Let
right?
us know how it goes.
Virginia is such a melting pot culturally, and I imagine that comes directly from past experiences. I mean,
Well, we've got the DC suburbs and then Banjo Country, and that's about it.
but I mean, a lot of visitation, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh, a whole lot of visitation, especially to Acacia Lodge last Thursday. It was awesome. Anyway, there's a follow-up question from Brother Brad, and he said, "So who acts as judge and jury in these various jurisdictions?" I believe in Virginia, it is the junior warden who conducts the trial.
Yeah. So, like, same thing here in Illinois. The verdict, however, comes from the lodge as a 2/3 vote.
Mm.
Yeah, in Florida is majority vote. The jury is the lodge, and the judge. I'll have to go over it. I'm under the impression that it's the master of the lodge, but I'll have to read over it again.
Yeah, I believe the master as well, unless, again, trial is brought up against him, in which he can't be the judge for his own trial.
Yeah, and here there are very specific details as to can the accused be in the room while the votes are taken. So there is time for deliberation, and deliberation is not like in a trial. If you go to trial here in the States, well, the jury is adjourned and they go out and they deliberate, they make their decision, and they come over and vote. Here is the opposite. Here, the charges are read in front of everybody, including the accused and any witnesses. And the jury, being the lodge, remains in the room, and any witnesses, participants, basically any witnesses, accusers, or defendants have to exit the lodge room while there's deliberation, voting, and it's secret. Written uh, written ballot. So, and it's majority. I would hate to see it happen, but there's a part of me that's super curious that I wish I could see it.
So let me clarify the previous point. After all evidence is given, the commission, meaning those gathered by the junior warden and those who are running the jury, they shall retire and consult among themselves and pronounce such judgment as a majority of those present deem proper. So that's where they come back, submit their judgment in writing to the lodge, and then that goes up through the DDGM and the Grand Master. So they act as the jury and send their judgment up that way.
That's so interesting because there's a big difference between majority and 2/3, like Illinois. That's a huge difference. It could be just one person.
51%. Yep.
Yeah.
All right,
Ideally,
moving
we don't ever have
on.
to deal with any of this. Ideally, we never have to witness one. That's the ideal scenario. That
Well, when you have red hats putting hidden cameras in women's bathrooms.
Well, what if someone planted it?
There's an anti-Mason who posed as a contractor,
wearing a red hat.
Yeah.
Repairing drywall and wearing a red hat. Yes. So Brother Scott Newbury mentioned something that I think is really good advice for all of us. And he says, it's a shame more Masons should read their Grand Constitution and related material. There's a lot of great information in there that will help you understand how things work in your jurisdiction. And we talked about this a little bit, but just to reiterate, know your Grand Lodge policies. They're dry as dirt, but you'll be very, very surprised at what you find in there. There are a lot of policies that are in desperate need of update, but Masonry, like any good bureaucracy, is bad about striking laws from the books. So Brother Gary Misner from Indiana says that Masons are actually charged and tried in Indiana for non-payment of dues. And it's a special case where the worshipful master actually issues a summary judgment and suspension. Brother Mike Hambrecht, talking about stenography, mentions that in Ohio, the stenographer is actually required to be a Mason, which I think is interesting and completely appropriate. As far as alcohol goes, Brother Scott Newberry says in New Hampshire, alcohol on site requires notice to the Grand Master and his district deputy. A table lodge requires dispensation and a Grand Lodge rep to be present. So they're almost as strict as Virginia in that sense. And going through it, that's just about all we've got, John.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm sure we could go all night on the various jurisdictional differences. Post your comments up on our Facebook wall for episode 157 and compare and contrast. See what goes on. Again, a lot of this stuff is accessible to brothers in their area. Who knows what their laws are, but maybe not so much if you're traveling through. So help enlighten the rest of us. With that, let's start wrapping things up, and I will start with Robert Johnson.
So I thought it was really, I don't know, man. The word serendipitous really I like to use when we're talking about good things. But there is an oddness to the fact that our news this week covered something that was just so awful and happened to do with Masonic Trials. Because ultimately, one of the things we really didn't touch on is that, and I'm fairly certain it's common practice around the United States that if a brother is convicted of a crime, specifically a felony, while a Mason, he is automatically expelled. Just automatically, there's no trial. You're just out. So in this case, I mean, this is a felony offense. So whoever this guy is, he's out. You can bet on that. And I don't know. It was a really weird happenstance that we had this episode tonight. But Masonic Trials, again, let's hope we never have to see one. We never have to be a part of one. We shouldn't have them at all, right? Because we're supposed to be brotherly and abiding by the laws under whose protection we live, as we say in one of the charges. So that's all I got. I learned a lot. It was an illuminating episode for me, hearing about some of the interesting differences we've got there in Virginia and some of the interesting commonalities Juan's jurisdiction and my jurisdiction have. Man, they really hate the booze. Stuck in the prohibition, I guess. But in any case, if you like these Masonic podcasts, please check out Whence Came You on Sundays, 9:30 at night. We've been doing segments called 10 for 10 with worshipful masters, sitting worshipful masters from around the country, kind of getting a flavor and their take on Masonry and the health of Masonry and their challenges and their successes around the nation. So not just in my neck of the woods, not just in DC or in Florida or Minnesota or wherever the TMR hosts are, but all around. So we talked with RJ Hughes last week from Pennsylvania. And it was just really, I find these segments totally just amazing and illuminating. I want to ask these masters all the same questions because I want to see the differences. But we're just coming up with questions every week, and getting these really cool answers. And hopefully the answers you're hearing from these brothers are helping you make your decisions and maybe giving you a little bit of affirmation on your feelings on whatever you're going through while sitting in that seat. So thanks very much, and thanks for watching the show. Hope to see you in June.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Next up, Juan Sepulveda.
Well, this is I enjoy it sometimes going to these topics that might not be as popular as the rest, but it is important for them to be revisited, for us to familiarize ourselves a little bit with the process and understand how our fraternity handles its business. And just, I'll echo what Robert said. Hopefully this is not something that we have to be a part of ever, that we don't have to actually sit in judgment against one of our own brothers for one of their transgression or an alleged transgression. It is a very unpleasant thought, and I'm sure it's, regardless of the outcome of the verdict, it will have an impact on people's perception of everybody involved. So hopefully it doesn't ever get to the point where it has to go to a Masonic trial. And, if you, just to reiterate to brothers, if you see a brother who is perhaps making decisions that are un-Masonic, or making decisions that could tarnish his reputation or the reputation of the fraternity, it is your job to, provide wise counsel and help them in straightening their ways. So those aren't easy conversations to have, but we're not in this because it's easy. We're in it because it's the right thing to do. So we lead by example by following those precepts. Thank you all, brothers, for listening to the Masonic Roundtable. And for those of you who are listening to this on the podcast and not enjoying the live video, you are missing out. I'm not going to describe the shirt that I'm wearing. I'm just going to show it only to the brothers that are on YouTube. If you want to see what it is, go to youtube.com and find the Masonic Roundtable. And while you're there, click on subscribe. Make sure you don't miss any of our videos. There's always nice treats there for you. So if you want to have a shirt like this one, go to thewindingstairs.com and click on the shop link above, and you'll see this and many others. So thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Juan. Jason's unbuttoning his shirt now. So
if you want to have a shirt like this one, go to thewindingstairs.com/TMR shirt, because this shirt is absolutely amazing, as are a number of Juan's designs on his site. He does a really great job, and his shirts are absolutely fantastic. I think I've got 3 or 4 different designs of his at this point. So really, really excited for Juan and all the cool shirts that he's doing. So Masonic Trials, it's good that we have a mechanism in place to provide a relatively fair and judicious process for removing brethren from the fraternity. It sucks whenever we have to use Masonic Trials, but I'm very, very glad that we have them as a resource. And I think it's important that each brother knows the laws of his jurisdiction. Is absolutely crucial, especially when you're part of an organization that is built around a system of morality. That's just, that's what you have to do. So read your methodical digest or your grand jurisdiction constitutions, or whatever they may be called. Know your rights and know what to look out for, because you never know what might happen and where you might, be placed or have to place yourself as far as Masonic trials are concerned. So just keep an eye out, be informed, and know how and when to use that as a means of, making the fraternity better. So with that, thanks so much for watching and coming back week after week. It's good to be back. I apologize for missing last week. It's called a newborn. #excuses. But we're looking forward to seeing you in June, and it'll be a lot of fun. So John, back to you.
Thank you, Jason. We'll allow it. So Masonic Trials. The first step is not to get in one, not to be brought up on charges. So you always ask, am I being detained and am I free to go? Those are the only two questions you need to know.
And have a pocket copy of the Methodical Digest at the ready at all times.
That's funny stuff right there. Yes. But I think what's interesting too, and the more we think about it, is for most jurisdictions that don't follow Robert's Rules of Order, and where there is extreme power placed in the local master as well as the grand master. We've used the term before that Masonry is also described as a benevolent dictatorship, where the grand master can wave his hand and rules apply. All the more reason to guard the West Gate and bring the right people in, which is very contradictory that you'd have a lot of written down procedures for Masonic trials where everything else can be arbitrarily handled by the master or grand master. So I'm happy for that we do have a system that acknowledges a fair and honorable balance of power, while also keeping the elected officials during their tenure to have the powers that give them kind of more flexibility to operate for the good of the order and not for the detriment of the order. So with that, you guys have been great. Great episode, learned a lot, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.